Hello students, welcome to readmedprep Academy channel. Today we are going to discuss about human reproduction part 5. In part 5 we are going to see about gametogenesis in females, that is oogenesis. The gametogenesis in females is called oogenesis. What is oogenesis? It is the process of the development of the female gamete or ovum or egg in the ovaries. During fetal development, what happens? Certain cells in the germinal epithelium of the fetal ovary divides by mitosis. So, during fetal development, there are about 6 to 7 millions of egg mother cells. These egg mother cells are called oogonia. So, the eggs are present in large amounts during the 4th or 5th month of the developing fetus. After that, no more oogonia are formed. See, we must know that the ovum mother cells or oogonia has diploid number of chromosomes. The oogonial cells start dividing and they enter into the prophase 1 of the meiotic division 1 to form the primary oocyte. At this stage, the division gets arrested and the primary oocyte persists. You can see here that during the 4th to 5th month, there are nearly 6 to 7 million oogonia in the germinal cell clusters. Later, around 9th month, there are only 1 million primary oocytes. That means there are reduction in the number of oogonia and formation of primary oocytes. The primary oocytes, which is a diploid, gets surrounded by a single layer of cells, the granulosa cells. When it gets surrounded by a single layer of cells, it forms the primordial follicle. The follicle cells around the primary oocyte then again divides and gets surrounded by another layer, and this primary follicle is formed. So the primordial follicle, which has a single layer of cells around the primary oocyte, develops the 2 layers and forms the primary follicle. You can see in this picture the central oocyte and the zona pellucida surrounding the ovum, and outside the zona pellucida is the zona granulosa or the follicular cells. A large number of follicles degenerate from birth to puberty. So at the time of puberty, the ovary contains only about 60,000 to 80,000 follicles, which are left out in the ovary at the time of puberty. The primary follicle that gets surrounded by many layers of granulosa cells, and an outer layer of cells called the theca layer is formed. So now the secondary follicle is formed. So the secondary follicle consists of 2 granulosa cell layer. Around it is the theca cell layer. You can see in this photograph, and slowly a tertiary follicle is formed. How? A fluid filled space is formed within the follicle. That space is called the antrum. That is formed the secondary follicle, and the secondary follicle gets transformed into tertiary follicle. The theca layer gets organized into an inner theca layer and an outer theca layer. You can see in this photograph that the outer theca layer, the inner theca layer, the basement membrane, the granulosa cells, the antrum, and the center is the oocyte. Now, at this time, the primary oocyte within the tertiary follicle grows in size, and this completes the first meiotic division and forms the secondary oocyte. You must understand that the primary oocyte, which is diploid, now becomes an haploid secondary oocyte. So there is unequal division. That means the secondary oocyte is large and a small polar body is formed, which is the first polar body, and this polar body disintegrates. During fertilization, the secondary oocyte undergoes second meiotic division and produces a large cell called the ovum and a second polar body, and the second polar body also degenerates. We must understand that the tertiary follicle that is present now becomes a mature follicle or the Graafian follicle. How does the Graafian follicle appear? The Graafian follicle consists of the granulosa cells in the center. Outer side is the basal lamina. Outer to that is the theca layer, and inner to that is the antrum, and the ovum is present, and around the ovum is the zona pellucida, and outer to the zona pellucida is corona radiata. If fertilization does not take place, the second meiotic division is never completed and the egg disintegrates. At the end of the oogenesis in the females, each primary oocyte gives rise to only one haploid ovum. We have already seen that in the previous lecture, the spermatogenesis results in the spermatogonia giving rise to 4 sperm cells or spermatozoa, whereas in females the oogenesis gives rise to only one ovum and 3 polar bodies. The events of ovum formation: you can see the oogonium, which is diploid, becomes matured and forms a primary oocyte, and the primary oocyte becomes a secondary oocyte with a polar body. The secondary oocyte is a diploid cell, and this secondary oocyte becomes again the ovum and a polar body. The 2 polar bodies disintegrate. The ovum matures to form the mature egg cell. The mature egg cell is haploid. Now, what are the events in the formation of the Graafian follicle? The events: first is the primordial follicle that is formed around the ovum. The primordial follicle consists of a single layer of cells. Then it forms the primary follicle. The primary follicle consists of the double layer of cells around the ovum, and this primary follicle gives rise to a secondary follicle. The secondary follicle consists of the granulosa cell layer, and it is surrounded by a layer of theca cells. Then this gives rise to the tertiary follicle. The tertiary follicle consists of the outer theca externa and the inner theca interna, the granulosa cell layer, the basal lamina, the antrum, the ovum, zona pellucida. Now coming to the Graafian follicle. The tertiary follicle matures itself to become the Graafian follicle. The Graafian follicle consists of an outer theca layer, the basal lamina, the granulosa cell layer, the antrum, and the center is the mature ovum. The ovum is surrounded immediately by an inner layer called the zona pellucida and an outer layer called the corona radiata. Now let us discuss about the structure of the ovum. Human ovum is non-cladoic. What is meant by non-cladoic? It is not protected by shells. We can see in a hen's egg, the egg is protected by a shell, whereas it is cladoic. Whereas in a human beings, the ovum is non-cladoic. It is alecital. That means there is no yolk or negligible amount of yolk. Whereas in a hen's egg, you can see a yellow yolk. And this ovum is microscopic in nature. What is the size of the ovum? It measures around 0.1 millimeter in diameter. And the ovum is the largest cell in the human body. The cytoplasm of the ovum is called the ooplasm, and it contains a large nucleus called the germinal vesicle. The ovum as such is surrounded by 3 layers: the inner thin transparent vitelline membrane, and a middle thick zona pellucida, and an outer coat of follicular cells called the corona radiata. Between the vitelline membrane and the zona pellucida, there is a narrow space called the previtelline space. Any defect in the formation of the ovum in the ovary, or any defect in the motility of the ovum from the ovary to the fallopian tube, can cause infertility in a woman. Thank you very much for listening this lecture. Kindly subscribe, like, share and comment our channel Read MedPrep Academy. Don't forget to log on to www.readmedprepacademy.com. Our Facebook ID is Read MedPrep Academy. If you have any questions, please post in the comment box. Our email is readmedprepacademy@gmail.com. Thank you very much.